What's the dumbest thing you believed as a kid? For some reason, I thought every car that was made had to do a crash test. Probably because my dad once told that our car had a very good rating in the crash test. I was amazed by the fact that all cars were repaired so well before being sold. My brother had me convinced for a while that each person had to have a unique favorite color, and since his was blue, I had to change mine. On my first day of kindergarten, we had to introduce ourselves and say our favorite color. I was super stressed out because the kids in front of me picked the good colors, and I kinda panicked and told everyone my favorite color was gray. I often got caught doing stupid stuff when I was a young rascal. When I would get home, my dad would say a little birdie told him he seen me do such and such with the boys. Up until I was 8 or 9, maybe, I believed my father had some sort of snitch pigeon keeping an eye on me. Snitch pigeon is my new favorite phrase. Not sure if this was just a UK thing, but as a child I had some of those gooey jelly alien toys that came in plastic eggs, and the big rumor on the playground at the time, if you put a boy alien and girl alien in the same egg and put it in the fridge, they would make a new baby alien overnight. I told my parents about it and told them I was doing. While in bed, my parents added the extra baby alien overnight. So when I woke up and found the third alien, I lost it. Went into school and told everyone. For years I swore blind it was try and really happened. It was a very heartbreaking day when I realized what had happened. Reminds me of the time when my parents would sneak miniature food items into my dollhouse and say that the dolls had been grocery shopping. My brother and I wrote letters to Santa, and our dad would open up the coal furnace door and we would throw them in the fire. We believed they would go directly to the North Pole. When I was younger, my dad upgraded the speaker setup for the TV to include surround sound. The rear speakers were mounted to the ceiling and were large white boxes. On the front of the speakers it had the numbers 3508. I always thought that was kind of strange until many years later I realized they were Bose speakers mounted upside down. You know those animatronic dinosaurs at museums? I knew they were robots, but as a child I was convinced that the robot was unaware of its animatronic status. I believed that if the robot wanted to, it could and would step over the barrier and eat me and everyone else. This fear was compounded when my dad, more than once, picked me up and pretending he would drop me down the other side of the barrier. I thought that my stomach was actually the entire volume of my body. Eating food would pile it all up as if putting it into a bag. When I was asked why I would drink or eat smaller foods when I was full, my reasoning was, there are still cracks between all the other food I ate, so it can fall through those gaps. When I was about 4, my older sister told me that since the population of Japan was so high, Japanese people slept sideways on their beds so they could fit more people on every bed. I believed it until I went to a sleepover at 13 and suggested that we sleep Japanese style on the bed so everyone could fit. When I was younger, our garage always had a very distinct smell. My parents told my siblings and I that the smell in our garage was the smell of burnt tires, because my dad would work on cars and dirt bikes as a hobby. Being the middle child, we always tend to find out the family secrets whether we want to or not. Fast forward to when I am 15 years old. I standing in a parking lot with my mother and 2 girls I was in acquaintance with. As we were all waiting in this parking lot for our friend who was having the quince, I started to smell burnt tires. I said to my mom that it smelt like burnt tires. My mom and the 2 girls all started chuckling. I was confused as to what was funny, and the 2 girls said to me that I was not smelling burnt tires. My mom eventually told me what that smell was, and she just tried to convince me my smelling was off. I still put 2 and 2 together that night. In short, I was 15 years old when I found out that my dad was a huge pothead and would just smoke pot all the time in our garage. Also, burnt tires and weed should not smell the same. People don't like people that grow vegetables in their house. I secretly celebrated my mom's poor in-house gardening skills because her tomato plants never had any tomatoes. I was about 11 when I figured out what those tomato plants were. My mom told me babies came from pumpkin patches. I thought that if you eat a pumpkin you'll become pregnant. Only if you eat the seeds. Now I wasn't exactly a kid, but I was under 18, so I hope it counts. So when I was about 18, I was watching TV with my parents and a drug ad comes up on the TV and then gets to the part where it tells you who shouldn't take the meds, i.e. pregnant, nursing and stuff like that. So after the ad I look at both my parents and say, well, that sucks, you guys can't take those meds. My parents, both very confused, looked at me like, what, why? Which I tell them, well, it says you can't take it if you're nursing. Both my parents are nurses and I mistook nursing from the ad that it applies to nurses. My parents had a dang good laugh over that one. That actors, TV characters would have to come back into a studio for each rerun of a show, movie. I would always be so amazed that people would have the time to go into a room with a camera multiple times a day just so I could watch them do the same thing over and over again. That actors' names in TV shows were not their real names. I did not realize that actors would assume characters with different names. It definitely bummed me out when I realized this. Watching Star Wars: Return of the Jedi. When Darth Vader is defeated and Luke looks at his hand, I didn't understand that he was metaphorically becoming his father. I literally thought if he killed Darth Vader, he would become Darth Vader, suit and everything. I used to watch my dad go to the ATM, look at the receipt and get grumpy, frustrated. I knew how bank accounts and ATMs worked, but the kid logic part of my brain figured that they also kind of work like slot machines. In that, when you conducted some transaction on them, you got that slip with 3 icons on it. If you got one with 3 cherries, for example, you would take it inside and they would deposit $50 or whatever into your account. I figured he was frustrated because he kept losing all the time. I even asked him a few times when he was looking at the receipt, did you win? And he was like, no. My sister thought the same as a kid. My mother used to let her rub the card for luck, right before she's make a withdrawal. Not me, but my brother was convinced for a few weeks that some cows had longer legs on one side of the body so they could stand on hills. Those are the ones we get lean beef from. Hoo boy, I've been waiting for a question like this. So I grew up near a nuclear power plant, which 4-year-old me thought was a cloud factory. My parents didn't take me to church, but I knew that people went to church to worship God, who created the world. I was also a huge fan of the Care Bears at that time, who lived in the clouds. What do those 3 random tidbits about myself have to do with this question? Well, 4-year-old me came to the conclusion that the Care Bears go to church and worship the nuclear power plant as the creator of their world. That was perfect logic to my tiny toddler brain. My great-uncle did a low-rent Superman cosplay for me when I was visiting at around 6 or years old. And by low rent I mean blue jeans with red underwear over top, and a blue bath towel as a cape. I realized all of this several years later. At the time I was convinced it was really Superman visiting us in rural Arkansas, and I carried that surety into 2nd grade, where I got into a fight with a classmate who claimed Superman was a fictional character. I know this response is already buried, but thanks Op for asking a question that revived a cherished childhood memory. My stepdad had an old truck with 2 gas tanks that he would flip a switch to change from one to the other. He had us convinced that he would magically steal gas from other vehicles. He would tell us to pick one and we would watch the gas dial go from E to F while driving on the highway. Blew my mind. Once I was playing with some toys and my mom was talking on the phone to her friend. I guess they were talking about kids growing up and having families someday because my mom puts her hand over the phone and asked me if I wanted kids someday and if I wanted boys or girls. I gave it some thought and said that I wanted 1 boy and 1 girl. For the longest time after this, I thought that it had been completely decided, like my mom was just on the phone with whoever you called to place an order for kids, and my order had been finalized. My father told me once that I was actually an alien and they found and adopted me. I believed it for over a year, would go around telling people this wonderful backstory of mine. Eventually it got back to him and he didn't even remember telling me the story in the first place. Oh, this is something that just bit me in the A's last year. I grew up in a very small town, one of my friends was from a city, I was over at his place and his mom gave us a pomegranate. I've never seen or even heard of this before. Well, he told me not to eat the seeds because they were poison. Last year my wife bought a pomegranate for my son who was interested in trying new types of food. I said to my wife, just be sure he doesn't eat the seeds. She looked at me funny. I said, they really should put a warning label on them because the seeds are poisonous. She broke down laughing. I googled. Hats off to you, Sandy. You got me good. It was 30+ years.